Every piece of small apartment color advice tells you the same thing. Keep it light, keep it neutral, keep the walls pale so the room feels bigger. Color drenching is not an accent wall. It is not a bold paint choice. It is the complete, uncompromising application of one specific color to every surface in a room. Walls, ceiling, trim, architraves, built-in shelving, and in its most committed expressions, the furniture and textiles as well, so that the room exists inside one continuous tonal environment rather than a series of surfaces in different finishes. The technique emerged as a named practice in British interior design circles in the early 2020s, though its principles had been applied for centuries in the colored rooms of Georgian houses, the jewel-toned libraries of Victorian townhouses, and the deeply saturated interiors of Mediterranean villas. What the name gave it was permission, the specific, articulated acknowledgement that painting the ceiling the same color as the walls was not a mistake to be avoided but a decision to be made deliberately. The critical distinction between color drenching and simply painting a room a dark color is the ceiling. Paint a room dark and leave the ceiling white, and you have a room with dramatic walls. Paint the ceiling the same color and you have a room that has been transformed, because the ceiling is the surface that defines a room's height, and when it disappears into the same tone as everything else, the room stops having a visible top. The reason color drenching consistently makes small apartments feel more expensive is neurological before it is aesthetic, and understanding the mechanism explains why the technique works in ways that intuition suggests it should not. When a room has walls of one color, a ceiling of another, and trim of a third, the brain automatically maps every junction between those surfaces. Every corner, every edge where wall meets ceiling, every line where baseboard meets floor, all of these become visual boundaries that the brain registers as the room's limits. The room announces its dimensions with every surface change, and in a small apartment, those announcements are frequent and confining. Color drenching eliminates the announcements. When walls and ceiling share the same tone, the eye cannot locate the junction between them with the precision it usually applies, and a room whose boundaries the eye cannot precisely locate feels, paradoxically, less bounded. The brain reads spatial ambiguity as spaciousness, and spaciousness, in a room that is actually small, reads as expensive, as the specific luxury of a space that does not need to tell you where it ends. Not all colors drench with equal success, and the difference between a color drenching that feels deeply sophisticated and one that feels simply overwhelming comes down, in most cases, to the specific color chosen and its relationship with the room's natural light. Deep forest green is the color that drenches most consistently well across different light conditions, warm enough to feel inhabited, dark enough to create genuine depth, and associated sufficiently with nature that the brain finds it grounding rather than oppressive. Warm terracotta and burnt sienna drench beautifully in rooms with good natural light, creating the feeling of a Mediterranean interior where the walls themselves seem to emit warmth. Dusty navy and midnight blue drench with particular sophistication in north-facing rooms, where their cool depth is balanced by the blue quality of the light rather than amplified into coldness. Warm charcoal, not gray, not black, but the specific warm dark tone between them, drenches with extraordinary versatility, working in almost any light condition and with almost any furniture palette. And deep dusty rose or terracotta pink, used in its most muted, sophisticated form, creates the most unexpectedly warm and intimate drenched room available. In every case, the color should be chosen in the room's actual light conditions, and specifically tested on the ceiling before the full commitment is made, since the ceiling typically reads 2 to 3 shades darker than the walls in the same color. The ceiling is the surface that makes or breaks color drenching, and it is the surface that almost everyone skips when they attempt the technique for the first time. They paint the walls the chosen color, they paint the trim to match, and they leave the ceiling white, because leaving the ceiling white is what ceilings are for, and changing that feels like going too far. Going too far is the entire point. A room with dark walls and a white ceiling has a specific visual dynamic that works against the drenching effect entirely. The white ceiling floats above the dark walls like a lid, defining the room's height with complete precision and making the dark walls feel heavier rather than more enveloping. The room looks like it has had its walls painted dramatically. It does not look like it has been drenched. The moment the ceiling is painted the same color as the walls, or in a slightly lighter version of the same tone, for rooms where the full depth on the ceiling feels too heavy, the room transforms. The lid disappears. The walls and ceiling become one continuous surface. The room stops being a box with colored sides and becomes an environment, something you are inside rather than something you are looking at. That distinction, felt rather than seen, is what makes color drenching feel expensive. Color drenching applied in the wrong sheen level is one of the most common technical mistakes in the technique, and one that can take a beautifully chosen color and make it feel flat, heavy, or simply wrong in a way that is difficult to diagnose without knowing where to look. The received wisdom of interior painting is that flat or matte finishes are most sophisticated, and that sheen is a marker of lower quality. This wisdom holds in most painting contexts, but needs significant modification for color drenching. In a deeply drenched room, a completely flat finish on every surface, walls, ceiling, and trim, absorbs so much light that the room can feel oppressive rather than intimate, as though the color is consuming the space rather than defining it. The solution that most professional interior designers apply to drenched rooms is a subtle variation in sheen between surfaces. Walls in a flat or very low sheen finish to absorb light and create depth. Trim and architectural detail in a slightly higher sheen, eggshell rather than flat, so that it catches light and reads as a subtle variation within the same tone rather than a contrasting element. And ceiling in either flat or a very slight sheen depending on the room's height and light. This variation is barely perceptible as variation. It registers only as a quality of light moving through the room rather than as visible difference. And it is the difference between a drenched room that glows and one that simply sits. The single most important variable in color drenching is not the color itself, but the relationship between the color and the specific quality of natural light in the room. And getting this relationship right is the difference between a drenched room that feels like a considered sanctuary and one that feels like a mistake that is now on every surface. South and west-facing rooms receive warm, golden light for significant portions of the day, light that enriches warm colors and softens cool ones. In these rooms, deep forest green, terracotta, warm charcoal, and dusty rose all perform beautifully, and the drench can go darker than might feel comfortable without the benefit of that warming light. North and east-facing rooms receive cooler, bluer light that can make warm colors feel dull and intensify cool ones in ways that feel harsh. In these rooms, the drench should either lean into the cool light, deep dusty navy and slate work magnificently, or counteract it with colors warm enough to survive the coolness, like deep terracotta or warm amber. The test is simple and non-negotiable. Paint a large sample, at least 60 by 60 centimeters, on the wall and the ceiling, and observe it across a full day before committing. The color at 9 in the morning and the color at 4 in the afternoon in the same room can be different enough to change the decision entirely. The furniture and textile approach that makes color drenching feel fully intentional rather than accidentally overwhelming follows one principle that most people reverse. In a drenched room, the furniture and textiles should be quieter than the walls, not louder. The instinct when a room is painted a deep, strong color is to balance it with furniture in a contrasting neutral. Pale sofa against dark walls, light wood against deep green, to prevent the room from feeling heavy. This instinct is understandable and almost always wrong. Contrast between furniture and wall color in a drenched room breaks the immersive quality that makes the technique work, reintroducing the visual boundaries that the drench was specifically designed to dissolve. The correct approach is tonal harmony. Furniture and textiles chosen in colors that exist within or adjacent to the drenched tone rather than in opposition to it. A deep forest green drench with a sofa in warm olive or dusty sage, cushions in ochre and amber, and a rug in warm brown and cream. A terracotta drench with furniture in warm rust and burnt orange, textiles in natural undyed linen, and objects in aged brass and terracotta clay. The room stays within its color world rather than fighting it, and the result is a space that feels completely, confidently decided. Three mistakes appear in almost every failed color drenching attempt, and identifying them in advance is the most reliable way to avoid them. The first is stopping at the walls. Paint the walls, skip the ceiling, and the drench is not a drench. It is a bold paint choice, which is a different thing with a different effect. The ceiling is not optional. The second is choosing a color in isolation rather than in the room's actual light. A color swatch in a paint shop or on a screen is not the color on your walls. Test it in the space, on the surface, in the light, and test it on the ceiling specifically, where it will read several shades darker than it does on the wall sample. The third is fighting the drench with contrasting furniture. Introducing pale, bright, or strongly contrasting pieces that break the immersive quality and turn the room into a conventional room with dramatic walls rather than a truly drenched space. Each mistake has the same underlying cause, the instinct to hedge. To not go quite all the way, to leave one surface white, to test in a smaller space first, to keep the sofa in a safe neutral just in case. Color drenching does not reward hedging. It rewards commitment, and the rooms that do it wrong are almost always the rooms that did not quite go all the way. The bedroom is the room where color drenching produces its most powerful effect, because it is the room where complete immersion is not just aesthetically compelling, but neurologically appropriate. The brain preparing for sleep benefits from an environment that is visually contained, that has no unresolved surfaces demanding attention, and that creates the sense of enclosure that human beings have sought in sleeping spaces for thousands of years. A bedroom drenched in deep dusty navy or warm forest green or rich terracotta, walls, ceiling, trim, and built-in wardrobe all in the same tone, creates a cocoon quality that no other decorating approach can replicate. The room feels like it exists at a remove from the rest of the apartment, a contained environment with its own atmosphere and its own rules, where the demands of the day cannot reach. The bedding in a drenched bedroom should follow the tonal harmony principle. Deep linen in a color adjacent to the drench, not a crisp white that breaks the immersion. One warm lamp on each side, with bulbs at 2700 K or lower, so that the drenched walls glow amber in the evening rather than reading as simply dark. And nothing on the walls except the color itself. No art, no mirror, no additional visual information. Because in a room that has been completely immersed in one beautiful tone, the color is the art. Color drenching works in large rooms. It works extraordinarily well in small ones. And the reason explains something important about what small apartments actually need that most design advice misses entirely. Large rooms have scale on their side. They can afford visual complexity, contrasting surfaces, and the conventional approach of pale walls and white ceilings, because their dimensions do the work of making them feel spacious regardless of what happens on their surfaces. Small rooms do not have this luxury. In a small room, every surface is close, every boundary is visible, and every color change announces a limit. The conventional approach, pale walls, white ceiling, contrasting trim, works against the small room at every step, making it look exactly the size it is. Color drenching removes this disadvantage completely. In a small room, the dissolution of boundaries that drenching produces has nowhere to be interrupted. The room is small enough that the immersive quality is total, that the eye cannot find a contrasting surface to reset against, that the color world the Drench creates is the only world the room contains. The small room becomes not a small room with beautiful walls, but a complete environment, a specific, contained, deeply intentional space that measures itself not in square meters, but in atmosphere. It feels like it was always supposed to be exactly this: one complete, immersive, deeply considered environment. Subscribe for a new interior video.